the miracles of Jesus Christ. The world of ancient Israel was a place of quiet villages, bustling marketplaces, and winding roads that led to hills and shores touched by the hand of God. Amid this ordinary landscape, one man walked among the people, Jesus of Nazareth. He spoke with authority that astonished teachers of the law. He healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, and brought life to those who were near death. He calmed storms with a word, fed thousands with only a few loaves and fish, and cast out darkness both visible and unseen. These were not mere stories, they were signs of God's kingdom breaking into the world, moments where faith, compassion, and divine power intersected in ways that changed lives forever. In this video, we will journey through the miracles of Jesus Christ. We will walk the dusty roads of Galilee, sit beside the seas and hillsides, and witness the compassion and power that flowed from his words and hands. Each story is told in a calm, biblical, deep style, designed to bring reflection, wonder, and peace as you listen. Let us step into these moments together and witness the miraculous works of Jesus Christ. Chapter 1. The Wedding at Cana. Long version. Let your mind drift now to the rolling hills of ancient Galilee, to a quiet village called Cana, where stone houses sat close together, their white walls glowing softly under the warm sun. The air is filled with music, gentle laughter, the soft hum of people gathering for a wedding. In biblical times, weddings were not just a single evening celebration, but days of community, joy, and shared life. Neighbors brought food, relatives traveled miles on foot, and the entire village took part in the joy of the couple. Inside the courtyard, lanterns sway lightly in the breeze, flickering warm golden light across smiling faces. Tables are lined with figs, dates, sweet wine, and fresh bread still warm from the ovens. Children laugh and run between the clay pots, and at the center of it all is a young couple beginning their life together. Jesus is there too, not yet widely known, not yet followed by great crowd, but simply attending as a guest with his mother Mary and the first few disciples. He has not performed any miracles yet. No public signs, no displays of divine power, just a quiet presence, kind, gentle, observant, a man fully human, walking among friends and neighbors. Hours pass, and as the celebration continues, a subtle tension begins to ripple through the servants. A whispered worry travels from one corner of the courtyard to another. They have run out of wine. In that culture, this was more than a small inconvenience. Running out of wine at a wedding was deeply embarrassing, a sign of poor planning, a threat to the reputation of the families, something that could be remembered for years. Mary notices. She has observed Jesus since his childhood, has treasured hundreds of small mysteries in her heart, and she understands more than anyone that he is not ordinary. She approaches him quietly. "They have no wine," she says gently. "It is not a demand, not a command, just a mother's confident trust that if anyone could bring peace into this situation, it would be him." Jesus replies with words that seem mysterious. "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." He is saying the time for my public ministry, for signs and wonders, has not fully arrived, and yet Mary simply turns to the servants and says, "Do whatever he tells you." Her heart knows. She has faith before the miracle even exists. Nearby stand 6 large stone water jars used for ceremonial washing, a Jewish practice of purification before meals. Each jar holds 20 to 30 gallons. Pure, simple, humble. Jesus tells the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they draw water from the well, bucket after bucket, pouring cool, clear water into the jars, until each one is filled to the brim. There is no thunder, no flash, no trembling of the earth, just stillness. Then Jesus speaks again. "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." The servant dips the ladle into the jar, and when he lifts it, the water has become wine. Not just ordinary wine, but wine so rich, so fragrant, so full of flavor, that it surpasses anything served earlier in the celebration. The master of the feast tastes it, and his eyes widen with surprise. He calls the bridegroom to him and says, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." The crowd does not know what happened. The bridegroom does not know. The master of the feast does not know. Only the servants, Mary, and the disciples understand that something holy has taken place quietly in their midst. This, the Gospel says, was the first of Jesus' signs, a simple miracle, not of necessity, but of compassion. Jesus did not heal the sick here, or raise the dead, or calm a storm. He simply saved a family from shame and added joy to their celebration, a miracle of kindness, of abundance, of quiet divine generosity. The disciples see this, and their hearts stir with awe, their faith awakening like dawn, breaking over the hills. Chapter 2. The calming of the storm. Long, immersive, biblical depth narration. Evening settles over the Sea of Galilee. The sun dips behind the western hills, staining the horizon in shades of deep gold and fading crimson. Along the shoreline, fishing boats creak softly against the wooden posts, rocking gently in the quiet rhythm of the water. Galilee in those days was known for its sudden storms. winds that could fall upon the lake without warning, sweeping down from the surrounding cliffs and ravines with fierce and unpredictable force. But when Jesus and his disciples stepped into the boat that evening, the air was calm. The lake stretched out before them like polished glass. A peaceful crossing lay ahead, or so they believed. Jesus, after teaching crowds for long hours, found a cushion near the stern of the boat and laid down to rest. His disciples, seasoned fishermen familiar with every mood of the lake, took the oars and settled into the quiet night. The first hints of wind brushed across the water, barely noticeable, a light stirring. The disciples exchanged quick glances. They knew these winds. They had seen them grow into something fierce. Moments later, the sky shifted. Clouds gathered with startling speed, rolling across the stars like a dark curtain. The calm water began to tremble, then rise. Within minutes, the wind howled through the rigging. Waves crashed against the hull, spraying cold water into the boat. The disciples dug their oars into the turbulent waves. But the lake was no longer something they could command. The storm was sudden, violent. The kind of storm that could swallow boats whole and drag them into the depths. The disciples shouted over the roar of the wind, even the most experienced among them, men who had grown up on this very lake. Men who had weathered countless storms, felt fear tightening in their chests. The waves grew taller, slamming against the sides of the boat, pouring over the edges. Every man felt the frightening truth. The boat was filling with water. Panic rippled through them, yet through the chaos, Jesus slept in the stern, the very place where the waves struck hardest. He remained untouched by fear, untouched by noise, resting with a peace that defied the violence of the storm. Finally, in desperation, the disciples rushed to him. "Teacher," they cried, their voices breaking through the thunder, "do you not care that we are perishing?" They shook him awake, not out of disrespect, but out of terror. The raw, human fear of drowning beneath a storm that showed no mercy. Jesus rose slowly, the wind whipping around him, raindrops streaking across his face. He looked upon the storm, the towering waves, the darkness, the chaos, and then he spoke. "Peace, be still." 3 words, nothing more. But the moment they left his lips, something impossible happened. The wind stopped, not gradually, but instantly, as if silenced by an unseen hand. The waves lowered, falling into an unnatural stillness. The water, moments ago raging like a creature alive, became calm, perfectly calm. In seconds, the lake returned to the quiet mirror it had been before sunset. The disciples stood frozen. Their chests rose and fell with the breaths of men who had just tasted death and then witnessed authority unlike anything on earth. Jesus turned to them, not with anger, but with a depth they could barely comprehend. "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" His question was not a rebuke, but an invitation, a call to grow, to see beyond fear, to recognize that the one standing beside them held power, not only over sickness or over demons, but over the forces of nature itself. The disciples looked at one another, their voices hushed, trembling with awe. "Who then is this?" they whispered, "that even the wind and the sea obey him?" This moment marked a turning point. They had seen Jesus heal bodies, teach with authority, and care for the broken. But here, in the heart of a raging storm, they witnessed something more. Creation itself responded to his voice. This miracle, recorded in 3 Gospels, was not merely a demonstration of divine power. It was a revelation of who he truly was, and an echo of the very beginning when the Spirit moved over the waters and brought order from chaos. The calm after the storm was not only on the lake, but in the hearts of the disciples. A quiet realization that they were walking beside the Lord of heaven and earth, the one whose voice could silence the wind and command the sea. Chapter 3, The Feeding of the 5,000, long, peaceful, biblical, deep-style narration. The day had been long, and the crowds had followed Jesus farther than anyone expected. Word had spread, whispered from fisherman to farmer, from mother to neighbor, that the teacher had crossed the Sea of Galilee. By the time he reached the far shore, thousands had gathered, men, women, children, entire families who had walked for hours simply to hear his voice again. The hillside where they gathered rolled gently toward the water. It was springtime. The grass was thick underfoot, soft and green, unusual for the region, and noted carefully by the gospel writers. It was the kind of detail that stays with people when a moment becomes unforgettable. Jesus looked at the crowd, not with irritation, not with weariness, but with compassion so deep it changed the air around him. Many had come not only to learn, but to be healed. They brought their burdens, their wounds, their uncertainties, and he welcomed them all. The disciples, watching the sun dip lower, felt the tension rise. The crowds were growing restless. They hadn't eaten since morning. There were thousands, 5,000 men plus women and children. a number far beyond what they could imagine feeding. Philip was the first to speak what others were thinking. "Lord, where can we buy bread for all these people?" He wasn't being unfaithful, just practical. In his mind, it was an impossible situation. Andrew, more soft-spoken, stepped forward with something smaller, a child standing behind him, holding a small woven basket. Inside were 5 barley loaves, simple, coarse, the bread of the poor, and 2 small fish, likely dried or salted for travel. "Here is a boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish," Andrew said. "But what are they among so many?" The child looked up, curious, unsure, but willing. In that moment, the smallness of his offering only made the moment greater. Jesus accepted it with gentle hands, not as a miracle waiting to happen, but as a gift freely given. "Have the people sit down," he said. The disciples guided the crowds to the grass, grouping them in organized circles, 50s, 100s. The hillside now patterned like a great gathering prepared for a banquet that had no visible source. Jesus lifted the bread in his hands. He looked toward heaven and he gave thanks. Not for abundance, but for what had been entrusted to him, just as it was. Then he broke the bread, slowly, deliberately, and placed pieces into the disciples' hands. They walked among the people, uncertain at first, but as they distributed the food, something quiet and extraordinary was taking place. The loaves did not diminish. The fish did not run out. Every time a disciple returned to Jesus, his hands were full again. Every time they gave to the people, there was more, a miracle not of thunder, not of spectacle, but of steady, overflowing provision. The people ate until they were satisfied, not barely, not partially, but fully, as though dining at a king's table. When the meal was finished, Jesus told his disciples to gather the leftover fragments. They moved through the crowd with large baskets, and when they returned, each basket was filled to the top. 12 baskets, one for each disciple, each overflowing with the very bread they once doubted. The crowd murmured among themselves, eyes wide, hearts stirred, realizing they had witnessed something beyond human imagination. Some whispered, "Surely this is the prophet who was to come into the world." But Jesus, knowing their excitement would soon turn political, withdrew quietly to the mountain alone. The one who could multiply food, refusing to let his mission be multiplied into something it was never meant to be. And the people lingered on the hillside, the taste of the bread still fresh, the memory settling in like the twilight around them. A miracle of abundance born from a child's humble offering, and the compassion of the one who saw hunger not as an inconvenience, but as an invitation to reveal the generosity of God. Chapter 4. Jesus walks on water. Evening settled over the Sea of Galilee with a quiet heaviness, one that often preceded the unpredictable winds that swept down from the surrounding mountains. After the miraculous feeding of the multitude, the disciples were still stirred, their minds echoing with awe and questions they could not yet form into words. Jesus had sent them ahead in the boat, urging them to cross the lake toward Capernaum, while he dismissed the crowd and retreated alone into the hills to pray. He often withdrew in solitude, not from burden, but to remain aligned with the will of the Father. The disciples rowed steadily for a time, the water calm under the soft glow of early night. But as the hours passed, the wind rose. Sharp and sudden dash, carving waves across the surface of the lake. The sea, small but fierce in temperament, became wild. The boat pitched violently as the wind pressed against them. Their shoulders burned from rowing. The night stretched into the fourth watch, between 3 and 6 a.m., a time when exhaustion creates shadows in the mind. It was then, through the darkness and the spray of the waves, that something appeared upon the water. Figure, moving steadily, unaffected by the wind or the swell of the waves. The disciples strained their eyes. What they saw defied every boundary of nature they had ever known. He is walking on the sea. Fear spread through them like fire. Some cried out that it was a ghost, a supernatural omen, a sign of disaster. Their hearts pounded with confusion, dread, disbelief. And then a voice, clear, calm, familiar. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. The sound of his words cut through the storm as though the wind itself bowed to listen. They knew that voice. It steadied the trembling inside them. Peter, bold and impulsive, called back through the wind, "Lord, if it is truly you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus answered with a single invitation. "Come." Peter stepped over the side of the boat, his foot meeting the surface of the sea, and instead of sinking, the water held. He walked, one step, then another, eyes locked on Jesus. Each pace carried him farther from the boat, and deeper into the impossible. But the wind howled around him, pulling his attention away. The waves towered, cold spray, striking his face. Fear slipped in, quiet but quick, and in an instant the miracle beneath him gave way. Peter began to sink. "Lord, save me," he cried. And immediately, not after a breath, not after a lesson, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. The grip was firm, lifting Peter back into the security of his presence. "Oh, you of little faith," Jesus said softly, not in anger, but with the tenderness that understood human frailty. "Why did you doubt?" Together, they stepped into the boat, and at that very moment, the wind stopped, the sea fell silent. The storm dissolved as though it had only been waiting for its creator to arrive. The disciples stared at Jesus, breathless and overwhelmed. This was no ordinary prophet, no mere teacher. This was the one whom even the wind and waves obeyed. They fell to their knees. Truly, they whispered, truly, you are the Son of God. Chapter 5. Healing of the woman with the issue of blood. The streets were already crowded when Jesus returned to Capernaum. Word had travelled fast through markets, fishing docks, and narrow alleyways that the teacher had come back to the city. People pressed in from every direction, forming a living wall around him as he moved through the town. Fathers lifted their children onto their shoulders just to catch a glimpse. Merchants paused their work, leaning over their stalls to hear his words. It was as though all of Capernaum breathed in unison, drawn toward him by a pull they could not explain. Among the crowd was a woman who kept to the edges, moving quietly, almost invisibly. For 12 long years she had suffered from a continuous flow of blood, a condition that left her physically weak, socially isolated, and spiritually cut off under the laws of her time. She had spent all she had on physicians, endured countless treatments, and yet nothing had helped. Some remedies made it worse. Hope had nearly slipped away, until she heard that Jesus was passing by. Her plan was simple, almost too small to be noticed. If I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. Not speak to him, not interrupt him, not draw attention to herself, just a touch. But getting close enough was another matter. The crowd was thick, every person pushing forward to see him, and she, in her condition, was forbidden to be there at all. Still, she pressed forward. She slipped between shoulders, ducked under arms, stepped between clusters of people. Her heartbeat quickened, not from strength, but from determination. As Jesus moved through the street, his cloak brushed near the ground, the tassels swaying with each step. She stretched out her hand, fingers trembling, and touched the very edge of his garment. The moment her skin met the cloth, something pure and living surged through her body. A warmth, a restoration, a peace that settled deep into her bones. She knew. Instantly, dash, she was healed. But before she could slip away, Jesus stopped. He turned in the middle of the crowd and asked, "Who touched me?" The disciples looked at him, bewildered. "Master, you see the crowds pressing all around you, and you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus' expression was steady. He wasn't asking out of confusion. He was calling attention to something sacred. I felt power go out from me, he said. The woman froze. She had hoped to remain unseen, to disappear quietly into the crowd with her miracle, held like a secret gift. But something in his voice, gentle, inviting, full of understanding, drew her forward. She stepped out from the crowd, trembling, and fell at his feet. With tears in her voice, she told him everything. Her sickness, her years of suffering, her hope, her fear, and her simple, desperate touch. Jesus listened with the kind of attention that made the whole world feel silent. Then he spoke words that restored more than her body. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. It was the only time recorded in Scripture that Jesus called a woman daughter. A word of belonging, a word that lifted her from shame and placed her in the center of God's love. She stood, not just healed, but restored, whole in body, whole in spirit, and whole in the eyes of the one who saw her, when no one else did. Chapter 6. Healing of the centurion's servant. Capernaum was a city where cultures mixed. Fishermen hauled nets from the sea. Jewish families walked to synagogue, and Roman soldiers patrolled the streets in disciplined silence. It was a place where tension and cooperation lived side by side. Among the Romans stationed there was a centurion, a commander of 100 men, known not for cruelty, but for surprising humility. Unlike most Roman officers, he respected the Jewish people under his authority. He funded the construction of a synagogue with his own resources, earning an unusual admiration from the elders of the community. But despite his power, his household carried a deep sorrow. His servant, a young man he valued and cared for, had fallen gravely ill. The illness progressed quickly, leaving the servant near death. No remedy, no physician, no Roman knowledge of medicine brought relief. The centurion, a man accustomed to command, found himself powerless. Yet he had heard of Jesus. Not just rumors, but first-hand accounts from the town. Healings, deliverances, authority unlike anything he'd seen in Rome or in Judea. And so instead of approaching Jesus with a soldier's pride, he sent Jewish elders, respected men, to plead on his behalf. They found Jesus and said, "This man is worthy of your help. He loves our nation, and he built our synagogue." Jesus did not hesitate. He began walking toward the centurion's home, followed by his disciples and a growing crowd curious to see what might happen. But before they reached the house, another small group hurried out to meet them. Friends of the centurion, sent with a message. They bowed slightly, and one spoke. "Lord, he says he is not worthy to have you come under his roof." This alone was remarkable. Romans did not call Jewish teachers Lord. Romans did not consider themselves unworthy. But this man understood something others had not. The messenger continued, "But just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes. To another, 'Come,' and he comes. And to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." He was saying, "Jesus, your authority is greater than distance, greater than sickness, greater than the boundaries that limit the rest of us." When Jesus heard these words, he stopped walking. He looked around at the crowd, at his disciples, at the townspeople, and at the elders who had supported the centurion. And he marveled, not at the centurion's position, not at his military rank, but at his faith. "I tell you the truth," Jesus said. "Not even in Israel have I found faith like this." The crowd fell silent. A Roman a Gentile, believing with a depth that many who studied the scriptures never reached. Then Jesus spoke the simple, powerful words, "Go now, let it be done for you, just as you have believed." No touch, no journey to the home, no ritual. Just authority. The messengers returned to the centurion's house, and as they entered, they saw the servant standing, breathing steadily, strength restored, fever gone, as if life itself had flowed back into him the moment Jesus spoke. The centurion understood. Jesus' power was not confined by distance, not hindered by status, not limited by religion or culture. Authority flowed from him because he was aligned perfectly with the Father. And creation responded to his word, with the obedience of the universe returning to its rightful order. It was a miracle accomplished not through proximity, but through faith. Faith from a man who never asked for honor, only for mercy. Chapter 7. Healing at the Pool of Bethesda. Jerusalem was alive with movement during the feast days. Pilgrims from distant regions filling the streets, families carrying offerings toward the temple. The sound of voices rising between the stone walls of the ancient city. North of the temple grounds, near the sheep gate, stood a pool known as Bethesda, meaning House of Mercy. It was surrounded by 5 covered colonnades, their tall columns casting shifting shadows as sunlight passed through. But beneath those shaded walkways lay a contrast, a gathering of those who suffered, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed, men and women who waited day after day for even the smallest chance of healing. Why there? Because Bethesda had a reputation. At certain times the waters were said to stir, and whoever entered first would be healed of their affliction. Whether legend or something more, hope clung to this place like a fragile thread. Among those waiting was a man who had been disabled for 38 years, longer than Rome had ruled the region. longer than many in the crowd had been alive. He had grown old beside the pool, watching others come and go, watching opportunities pass just out of reach. He had no one left to help him into the water. No family, no friends, just endurance and the ache of being so close to hope, yet unable to grasp it. On this day, Jesus approached the pool quietly. He did not announce himself. He did not gather a crowd. He simply walked among the colonnades, seeing each person with eyes that travelled deeper than outward condition. When he came upon the man, he paused. Jesus knew the length of the man's suffering. Not because someone told him, but because the Father had revealed it. Jesus asked a question that seemed at first almost strange. Do you want to be made well? Not because the answer wasn't obvious, but because the question drew out the man's heart, his longing, his pain, and the truth of his situation. The man replied with weariness that had accumulated over nearly 4 decades. Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. He was not lacking desire. He was lacking hope. He wasn't even asking Jesus for healing. He was simply explaining his reality. But Jesus didn't need stirred water. He didn't need the pool at all. He didn't need timing or competition or ritual. He spoke 3 short commands. Words that cut through 38 years of paralysis. Like dawn breaking through a long night, rise, take up your mat, and walk. There was no pause, no gradual recovery, no trembling attempt to stand. Strength surged into the man's legs, muscles awakened, bones aligned, nerves responded. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, he stood upright. The mat he lifted was thin, worn, the same one he had laid on for years. Yet now it symbolized everything he was leaving behind. He walked through the colonnades, past those who had known him only as a fixture of suffering, out into sunlight he had not stood in for almost 40 years. The religious leaders, seeing him carrying his mat on the Sabbath, questioned him sharply. Who told you to take it up? Who healed you at that moment? The man didn't know Jesus' name. Jesus had slipped away into the crowd, not seeking recognition. Later, Jesus found him in the temple, a place he likely had not been able to enter for many years. There, among the worshippers, Jesus spoke to him again. See, you have been made well. Sin no more, so that nothing worse may happen to you. It wasn't condemnation, and it was restoration, a calling to a life renewed in body and in soul. And the man, now fully healed, went and told others that it was Jesus who had made him well, but the deeper truth remained. Bethesda was known as the House of Mercy. Yet on that day, mercy did not flow from the pool. It walked among them, stood before them, and spoke life into a man whose hope had nearly disappeared. Chapter 8. Raising of Jairus' daughter. The Sea of Galilee shimmered in the morning light as Jesus stepped off the boat. And before his feet had even reached the shore, a crowd had gathered. Voices rising, hands stretching, everyone pressing forward with need and expectation. But one man pushed through with urgency deeper than the rest. He was not a fisherman, nor a beggar, nor a common traveller. He wore the garments of a synagogue ruler, a man respected, educated, and entrusted with the spiritual life of the community. His name was Jairus. For someone of his stature, falling at the feet of Jesus was shocking, but desperation silences pride. And Jairus had reached a desperation few could understand. "My little daughter," he pleaded, breath shaking, "is at the point of death. Please, come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be healed and live." His voice cracked on that final word. Live. Jesus said nothing at first. He simply turned and began walking with him. The crowd moved as one, surrounding them so tightly that progress was slow. Every moment mattered. Jairus tried not to show it, but each delay tightened the fear in his chest. Every second felt like sand slipping through clenched fingers. And then another interruption. A woman had reached out and touched Jesus' garment, and he had stopped to speak with her. Jairus waited, heart pounding, watching minutes, precious minutes pass by. Before Jesus could resume the journey, a group of men pushed through the crowd toward Jairus. Their faces told the story before their words came. "Your daughter is dead," they said quietly. "There's no need to trouble the teacher any longer." The world seemed to fall silent. The sounds of the crowd faded. Jairus' knees nearly buckled. It was the sentence he feared more than anything. He had come so close. Hope had been within reach. And now it was crushed beneath the weight of finality. Jesus turned immediately to him. He didn't offer condolences. He didn't speak of mourning. Instead, he said, "Do not be afraid, only believe." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a promise. A promise spoken by the one whose words carried life. Jesus continued walking. Jairus followed, not because his mind understood, but because something in Jesus' voice refused to let despair be the final word. When they reached the house, the air was filled with wailing. Professional mourners grieving loudly, flutes crying out. Family members collapsed in anguish. The home that once echoed with a young girl's laughter was now drenched in sorrow. Jesus stepped inside and said almost calmly, "Why all this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead. She is only sleeping." The mourners laughed, not with joy, but with bitter disbelief. They knew death when they saw it. Jesus sent them all outside. Only 5 people remained: Peter, James, John, and the girl's parents. 2 hearts torn apart, but clinging to a thread of Jesus' earlier words. The room was quiet, still, the air heavy with the lingering presence of loss. There, on a low bed, lay the 12-year-old girl. Life gone, hands, pale eyes closed in the silence of death. Jesus approached her. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform a dramatic ritual. He simply took her hand in his. A gesture both tender and astonishing, for touching the dead was forbidden under Jewish law. But purity does not fear impurity. Life does not fear death. And Jesus spoke 2 words in Aramaic, the language a parent would use to wake a child from sleep. Talitha koum, little girl, arise. At that moment, colour returned to her cheeks. Her fingers twitched in his hand. Her chest rose with a breath, the first breath of restored life. She opened her eyes, not confused, not frightened. She looked as though she had awakened from a deep rest. She stood. A month prior, she had played in the courtyard. A week prior, she had run through the house laughing. And now she was walking again. Her parents frozen in awe, their hearts overwhelmed with joy and trembling wonder. Jesus turned to them with gentle practicality. Give her something to eat. Life restored, now sustained. He instructed them to tell no one, not because the miracle was small, but because his hour had not yet come, and crowds drawn by spectacle could not understand the deeper mission of the Messiah. But in that room, in that house, among a handful of stunned witnesses, death had bowed to the one who carried the authority of heaven, and a little girl lived again. And so as we reach the end of these remarkable accounts, we step back and look at the thread woven through each moment, a thread of compassion, of power, of a presence that moved gently through the world, yet changed everything it touched. Each miracle we explored wasn't merely an event, it was a window into the heart of Jesus Christ, a heart that saw individuals, others overlooked, a heart that restored what was broken, lifted what had fallen, and brought light into places shadowed by fear and suffering, from the quiet hills of Galilee to the storm-tossed waters, from humble homes to foreign lands. His actions spoke with a depth no words could match, declaring that no distance was too far, no illness too severe, no darkness too powerful for his compassion to reach. And as night settles around you now, there is a peace in simply remembering that these stories were not written only for their moment in time. They were preserved as reminders, echoes of a presence that still offers hope, still brings comfort, still invites the weary to rest. The miracles of Jesus were signs of a kingdom breaking through, a kingdom marked not by force but by mercy, not by fear but by healing, not by distance but by the nearness of God. As you let your mind grow quiet and your thoughts drift gently toward rest, carry with you the simplicity of those moments. A hand extended to the sick, a word spoken into chaos, a touch that restored, a voice that calmed storms. Both around and within, may these stories settle softly in your heart, reminding you that even in the stillness of the night, you are never far from the love and peace that shaped every miracle we've recounted. Thank you for joining this journey through the life and works of Jesus Christ. May your night be restful, your mind be at ease, and your spirit be comforted by the timeless truth of His compassion. Good night, and God bless.